Hey, John Gilroy here. Today, a company you have probably never heard of that has 10,000 partners in 180 countries. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. Our guest today is Jan Ruderman, Head of Government Sales at Zebra Technologies, Zebra. I can spell that pretty good, huh, Jan?
You just nailed our website, John. Perfect.
Yeah.
And you couldn't have said it better, by the way. We are the best kept secret in the IT space in federal.
It really is. I was at a trade show or something, and I saw a booth, Zebra. What the heck is Zebra? I don't know anything about them. And I figured, hey, bring Jan and say what's going on. And then the plot thickens. I started my research. You guys have been 55 years. You're everywhere. And here's what I found out. 80% of the Fortune 500 companies use you guys. Well, where have I been? Did I miss the boat here?
That's what I tell everybody. You know, you haven't heard of Zebra? Well, any place you go, you're going to see Zebra technology. You'll see our logo. Now you're going to start seeing that Zebra logo whenever you walk into any retail environment. And we're in other places too, but the retail's easy, right? Because you walk into Lululemon to Home Depot, you're going to find Zebra Technologies.
Well, Home Depot has a long supply chain where they get their bolts and their windows from who knows where, and sometimes it gets disrupted. And if I go to the Home Depot and I can't buy a 10-millimeter wrench, I'm just going to go to another store. Now, the federal government has a supply chain too, and they may have equipment that's has a more valuable implications for national security than a 9-millimeter wrench. So I want to hit on asset tracking, mobility, maybe even identity management, and the whole idea behind Zebra. And I think if you Google Zebra, you see a lot of retail stuff. But I think what happens is you get beat up and knocked around the retail world. All of a sudden, you have lessons to apply to federal supply chain. I think that's what we're going to focus on today, huh, Jan?
100%. If you think about the government, and a lot of people that aren't familiar with government technology sales will think, oh, government, that's the vertical, right? But no, government is no different from the rest of the vertical markets that Zebra focuses on. Retail, government has retail. They have the exchanges, they have the commissaries. Warehouses, you just touched on that, right? The warehouse space, distribution, transportation, logistics, government has all of that. Manufacturing, you could think about the systems integrators as manufacturers making F-35s and whatnot. They have supply chains, they have security requirements. And then, field operations, whether you're talking about maintenance and repair or other types of out in the field doing things, everything the government does fits into one of the verticals that Zebra is known for globally. And what we do very well, and we strive to be number one in every space that we go.
You know, and I know that before COVID, you probably didn't order much online. My wife did. And then ordering, and now I get, I'm sitting and I get an alert on my phone that's in the front, and it has a picture of it. And I think some retail innovations can be applied to the federal, especially this concept of visibility. Now, if we take our little car and drive down to the DOD, there's going to be generals there. They're going to be probably more rough and crude than I am. And they go, Jan, where's that box? Where is it? Now you tell me where those parts are, because we have to put an F-35 in the air. And all of a sudden, it's not John's 9/16 wrench. It's parts for an important Air Force application. So how do you apply that technology to the DoD?
Well, first of all, what you just said is what we say all the time. It's the catchphrase that it doesn't matter who you are, where's my stuff?
Yeah.
And, to your point, my stuff could be toilet paper to tanks. I mean, it is the entire spectrum, right? And what Zebra does is provides the ability through different choices of technology to provide that asset management and asset tracking capability that allows for you to know where your stuff is, where it is not, if it leaves someplace that it shouldn't be. If it was taken, it can be identified as when was it taken, maybe who took it. So there's a lot of aspects that go into what Zebra technology can do from an asset management perspective. We're doing projects today, and let me preface this by saying we're replacing pen and paper in most cases. Mm-hmm. So our federal government is modernizing its supply chain, and there's a lot of reasons why they want to do that. Obviously, they want to know where their stuff is, but there's more reasons than that. The government manages DoD alone manages billions of dollars of government-funded equipment, billions, hundreds of billions. Let me say it that way. And again, if you're working on an F-35 and the F-35 needs to be in the air and it needs a part, and that part is in the warehouse, they need to know where is it in the warehouse? Is it in the wrong place? They need to effect that repair as quickly and efficiently as possible. And if you're working on pen and paper, that means you're constantly doing inventory, you're constantly having to prepare for audits, and it's taking a significant amount of time away from doing things that really we should be focused on, which is the repair of the aircraft or the maintenance or whatever the case may be.
Okay, now we talk about my Honda Pilot. So take my Honda Pilot in the dealership. Guy comes out with a tablet and he knows everything. He knows my birth. He knows everything about me, probably know what I had for breakfast. And off he goes. Now, that's just a little car. If you're dealing with tanks or F-35 or parts, I mean, all of a sudden you have to be a little more secure than with a guy at the car shop. Huh? I mean, so how does security fit in this conversation?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, John, when I was in the Navy, I was an avionics technician, and we had manuals for our aircraft. So this was back in the day, right? Sorry, aging myself a little bit, but we had, like the encyclopedia, we all had, 25 encyclopedias on the shelf. I had 25 aircraft manuals for one aircraft sitting on the shelf for all the different systems and technologies associated with that aircraft. And then if I needed to go get a part, I had to go through this big, long process to go do that. So that's obviously all changed. That is all digitized now. But in order to have access, back in the day, I just walked in and got the manual off the shelf. Today, if I want to have access to, very sensitive data that's found within those manuals, I have to walk in with my CAC card. I have to CAC into the device, and I have to ensure that I have the access control to hit those manuals and do what I need to do. So what Zebra does, of course, is follow all the standard requirements that the federal government puts in place. And that goes from things that are unseen, like having FIPS support in the devices, to the proper level of Android version that the government is operating on, to passing the DoD requirements for security and being tested and approved by the DoD and being put on their approved products list. So we go through all of those processes, maintain all the certifications, and that is no easy task. And as you may know, as a consumer, Android changes regularly. We have to maintain and provide updates for that as well. And we do that in a way that is not consumer focused, but let's say government or business focused. So we provide a much more controlled mechanism to ensure that things don't get upgraded unless you want them to, that you have the ability to lock down certain capabilities and ensure that nothing changes on those devices unless the maintenance or the people in charge of maintaining them want them to.
Now we do time travel, go back to 1978. John Gilroy was sitting in a coffee place near Andrews Air Force Base. And these Air Force guys sitting next to me talking. And this one guy turned to the other. He said, the documentation for this plane weighs more than the plane.
100%.
I was just, whoa, baby. So this is an old problem. And I think over the last 47 years, many people have tried to jump in and try to alleviate some of this paperwork and have access to it. So what we have here is not an easy button where Jan walks, bang, done. No, there are legacy systems to concern yourself with. And much as we'd like to say that everyone in the past was brilliant and well documented and everything's great, there's no dead ends. There's lots of dead ends. There's lots of extra code. There's lots of extra who knows what. And maybe someone got mad. And maybe John Gilroy got mad at his boss, Jan, and said, hey, guess what? I'm going to add this and that. And so how do you deal with legacy systems for the DoD?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess I'll start by saying Zebra by itself is not a solution. Yes, we have solutions that are hardware-based. We even do things that are software-oriented. But we don't exist without our great partners. You mentioned it early on. We have thousands of partners out there. That includes not just the companies that we work with closely to resell our solutions, but the companies that have other pieces to the solution that are required to complete the delivery. So we find it extremely important to work with the companies that are very closely focused on the federal government and those different areas that they are going to modernize. So for instance, in the supply chain space, we're very close with companies like SAP, for instance. And so as the government makes decisions to upgrade their legacy technology, we're there to be a part of that and make sure that is happening. Where they are slow to evolve into newer technology, we have to find ways to ensure that we are backing into those systems through bridges of some type. And that routinely happens as well. Things like serial port, still required in certain places. We have the ability to do that.
We should tell the younger listeners that's SERIAL.
Yeah,
They
yes,
don't know
yes.
what that is. They know what a USB is. I have no idea what that S stands for.
I mean, some of the aircraft still flying are decades old, right? They still have legacy ports that need to be connected to, right? So we also have to be careful of, back to, like I said, being able to provide the government the operating system support that doesn't change so rapidly, because we know they take their time in modernizing and upgrading their technology. So we have a very long life cycle in our technology. Some of our products have a combined support window of 10 years. So to a government, that's not unusual to expect support for something for 10 years. So we provide that.
Well, let's go from 10 years to today. And if I order something on, you can go to FedEx and find it where the thing is. You can UPS find where the thing is. I mean, that's pretty simple. But that's not 10,000 parts in 10,000 places with I don't know what kind of circles and moving and hubs and spoke and everything else. Yeah. And if you go to zebra.com, you see, I think the phrase was, real-time evaluations. I mean, you talk about real-time asset and inventory visibility. Now, okay, really? I mean,
what does that mean?
Real-time, man? Yeah.
Real time is, and it's a journey. How and for the government, it's going to be a journey, right? You start where you can start, and you have plans to continue to modernize and grow so that you can get to a place where you have what you need to be operationally successful, right? And so in the government, they have something that nobody else has, and that's contested operations. So what does that mean? Well, somebody doesn't want it to get there. Our enemies do not want our supply chain to be successful and seeing where things are and having them get there when they need to be. So what Zebra provides are a number of different ways to accomplish any of those different levels. As an example, John, do you watch NFL football? Come on.
Okay, let's say for the sake of conversation, I do.
Well, John, in the NFL, as an example of where things are and what's happening with those things, there's something in the NFL that they're using called next-gen stats. And essentially what that is the players, the balls, a number of different items that are used during the game are actually enabled with Zebra's RFID tracking technology. So during the course of the game, we actually have insight that's provided to the coaching staff and to the NFL that shows them what a player's doing, how they're performing. Perhaps they are going into concussion protocol. We can tell you whether they have had an incident that requires concussion protocol because of the G-force or the speed and the stopping distance, et cetera. So it's a pretty cool technology. How does that have anything to do with the government and their supply chain? It's the same technology. So we can track anything, where it's going, where it's been, and how it got there. So from a government perspective, if they are using barcode technology, barcode is one way of implementing tracking technology, but that has certain limitations. Then there's RFID technology. That gives you more advanced capabilities to track things. Then you couple that with the asset management software that provides alerts and capabilities to identify when and where it's been. And then there's other technologies that you can layer in. So you technically have the ability to say, I know where something is in a warehouse exactly, or within a grid. Or I can say it's left the warehouse and it got on this truck, or it got on this aircraft, or it got on this ship. Here's where it went in the ship. Here's when it came off the ship. So you have all of those things, and it's up to the government to determine, what level of capability they want, what's most important to them, what are their priorities. And we're working on all different types of projects to do all different types of meshing together of those different systems, because there is no one overarching government supply chain. There's hundreds of individual supply chains that need to be combined, if you will, to provide that full insight into the where and what.
Well, if we talked about 1978, we got to talk about 2022. So in 2022, I was in Long Beach, California on a boat. And I looked out, and you can imagine what I saw. I saw, container ships stacked to just sitting waiting to get in.
Yeah, yeah.
And this seems like a history book from high school. No, 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 no. People, I remember it. And so that's when I first started getting sensitive to supply chain. And it dawned on me, the more people I talk to, the more people in the military I talk to, they talk about secure and resilient supply chain. That's what they want, man. And with all those vulnerabilities there, you would think there's all kinds of ways to attack with the different exchanges that take place from this port to that to railroad back here, there. I mean, it seems like it's a pretty vulnerable way to attack. And we have people with, the guy in the car shop with a portable device. Oh, yeah. Attack vector. Yeah, yeah. So your attack vector increasing every day, isn't it?
Well, I believe if you look at any point in time, it seems like cybersecurity is always top of the list for anything.
Yeah.
When it comes to not just government, but IT period, right? Cybersecurity is the ongoing, continued concern, right? So we continue to focus and emphasize on not just meeting the minimum requirements, but going above and beyond with our capabilities. And some of the things we do in the commercial space aren't necessarily government-related things, but we're creating identity management capabilities to use facial recognition and things of that nature to provide different levels of access control. And then with the asset management program, then you start to move into the ability to say, okay, of course your CAT card lets you into your system, but if you're tagging your systems, if that system walks out the door, an alarm indicates of some device that you don't want to leave the store. In the case of shrinkage of retail, it's no different from a high sensitive item in the government. If it leaves a space, it's identified. You also have the ability to tag the system with certain metadata to say, as an example, this fire extinguisher expires from effective use on January 1st, 2027. We have all that ability to tag anything of that nature to eliminate something that might be out of security standards at a certain date, or whatever the trigger is, gives you more information so that you can avoid those types of situations before they become security risk. And one other point I just wanted to bring out, since you mentioned things sitting on a ship during COVID, here's a perfect example of a solution that made a difference for the government. One of our federal agencies during COVID was highly, highly tasked with producing documents that needed to get out to their customers, if you will, in a reasonable amount of time. And during COVID, it was taking a year for these documents to make it back to certain individuals. They implemented a program using Zebra RFID technology, and they took the time down from identifying the location of those documents to be able to affect them from over 8 hours to less than 20 minutes. That's the type of efficiencies we're talking about improving when we talk about using this location technology in a specific location.
And it's got to be accurate. So there's a lot of pressure here. I mean, we talked about Air Force maintenance, and I know people who run Air Force maintenance companies. There's no here's a wire. It's going to last for another 5 years, and it has to be replaced. And there's people aerospace engineers who worry about the freeze thaw capabilities of a wire in a specific aircraft. Really? Oh yeah, and it's not. Maybe we'll get to it. No, it's someone's life is dependent on it, so it's important.
100%.
And serious. Yeah. So we've looked at the past here. Let's look to the future. So 4 or 5 years down the road, where do you see Zebra heading? How can you improve your service to federal agencies from the DoD to over to all the civilian agencies?
It's a great question. So, we kind of led off with Zebra was one of the best kept secrets to federal IT, and that's because Zebra hadn't been focused on the federal government in an organized fashion. So we're growing our business. We're adding members to our team. We're building more products that have government in mind from the development process. So what we see happening in the next 3 to 5 years from a Zebra perspective is much more proliferation of the ability to do these types of things that we're talking about. The government is just now investing in this modernization. So, we're doing supply chain projects with a number of DoD branches, a number of civilian agencies, and they're just getting started with this stuff. So we're going to see the results of their efforts and their investments in the shape of hopefully reducing their time to be prepared for audits, maybe even passing an audit for the first time in many years. But at the end of the day, we're going to help greatly improve the efficiency of our federal government, and that is going to continue the proliferation of the systems to allow for that. And so we're seeing that now. We're seeing a significant investment and desire to continue that path.
And I think the takeaway is that 55 years, I mean, your company has been in a very competitive market and has thrown a lot of punches and taken a lot of punches and made mistakes and made bad products, good products, and gone down this road. And all of a sudden, the government really needs it now, and they can benefit from all of that experience in so many different places. And look at the Air Force. There's Air Force bases all over the world where you guys are all, so some of the let's face it, there's headaches and problems in getting in out of Africa. I mean, there's just concerns that people have never even thought of, and different parts of the world. And if you read different books about, I think of chip wars, of how some of the chips are distributed so many different places and timing. And if commercial companies have maybe solved some problems, I think the federal government should take advantage of you, Jan. Yeah, we're going to take advantage. Well, I think they should, because you figured it out for commercial companies, and that gives so much credibility. It really does.
Exactly. We're doing this for all the largest companies in the world, and we're doing it well. And that does mean something to the federal government, but it obviously also is very important to them that we adapt to what the government needs. And that's what we are, continuing to do now as we adjust our products to do things like reduce capabilities that they don't want that a commercial device has. Like sometimes if you're talking about special operations, they don't necessarily want that microphone or that camera to work. So we do those types of things, right? So that's my point, is we have to adapt, and we are adapting, and that we'll continue to do that because the customer needs what the customer needs, not what we might be selling to Lululemon.
Yeah. From Lululemon to the DoD, that's a range. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Jan Ruderman, Head of Government Sales at Zebra Technologies.